Hello, everyone. I'm Jenalynn Weed, and welcome to Against the Tide Media. I have the honor and privilege of speaking with Brock Heasley and Orlando J. Gomez, two men who are behind the project The Shift, a short film that we have had an interview on already by Darren Scott Jacobs. And so this is a follow-up interview to dive deeper into the shift and the project and what's the future of the project. And so I wanted to introduce Brock and Orlando. First of all, on behalf of Against the Tide Media, thank you for taking the time to have this interview. And so we're diving deeper into the shift in this interview. So I wanted to remind our fans, if you haven't watched the first interview with Brock, hosted by Darren Scott Jacobs, you should watch that one first to get oriented to this one as we're diving deeper into the shift. And of course, you should watch The Shift as well. But yeah, how are you? How are you, Brock? And how are you, Orlando?
Good. I think we're both doing pretty good. And I guess I'm speaking for Orlando, and I shouldn't, but but it's a heck of a time right now. The shift is ramping up to a big marketing push, and so it seems like there's just a million things to do every day to get prepared for that. But doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely doing well. We're just trying to survive the 110-degree weather out here right now.
And there's that.
Making it so much worse.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But you don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do anything. Just want to lay around.
I wanted to start off with a fun question. And I wanted to ask, what is something that our fans might not know about you guys? It can be funny, it can be silly, just something that our fans might not know about you guys. So I will pass it over to Brock first.
Okay. So my go-to response for this, people who don't know me in real life, is that the first name that I had in this earthly life was not Brock, it was Spock. And that is because when the doctor pulled me out, he noticed my ears first thing, which are more on the pointed end of things than they are on the round end of things. So both my ears are kind of pointed. So yeah, I have pointed ears. I'm not an elf, but I do have pointed ears.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Spock's a great character in Star Trek. So...
Absolutely. Not that I could appreciate it at the time, but yes, there are worse names.
Yes, that's very true. All right, Orlando, what about yourself? What's something our fans might not know about you?
So first of all, I didn't know about that. So Brock, thanks for sharing. That's gonna come up.
You've never noticed my ears?
I didn't know they called you Spock, so I think that's gonna come up now. Yeah, man. I don't know. So for me, I think my kind of funny go-to is that I actually learned how to drive stick shift on a racetrack. I won a trip through my job many years ago, right after I got married, and just from work, and got sent out to Sonoma and got to race cars on Infineon Raceway. But when I got there, I learned that all those cars are stick shift. Race cars are not automatic, and I was like, I've never touched a stick shift before. And so I think they're a little frustrated because, these are all gearheads. These are all car guys. And so they actually took me out on the drag strip and had me practice in some of the race cars there and grinding down gears and totally messing up the car. But after like a half hour, they're like, it's good enough. You can go race the track now. And when I was actually racing, I ended up stalling the car out on one of the blind turns, and they just absolutely freaked out because they're afraid that people are going to come around the corner and like rear end me.
Oh my God.
But they didn't. I got up and running again and got out there. But yeah, it was really fun and really terrifying because I didn't know what I was doing. And it was open wheel too, so we're like really low to the ground, and there's like no shell. You're just exposed. So it felt really fast.
Oh my gosh, that would have been terrifying. But at least, you can say that you've done it. You can check it off your bucket list. And
that's right.
Yeah, but wow. Okay, so those are some pretty cool facts. And thank you guys both for just what you've been doing with The Shift. Brock being the writer and the director, the creator of The Shift, and Orlando producing it. And I wanted to take a step back and ask you both, because you both have different roles, if if we could hear a little bit about your story and how you got into the production world professionally. So I'll hand this off to Orlando.
So for me, production was something that I got into as a kid. I mean, looking back at even home videos that my mom captured of me and my siblings, and I'm always performing, I'm always playing to the camera, whatever. And it probably was late elementary school, started getting into choir and doing school plays, and in junior high, started picking up my parents' camcorder and started making my own little short films. And I just carried that through all through high school, did the same thing, and then graduated high school and started my production company. And so it's been 15 years now of professionally just working in production in various capacities. But it was something that I was immediately drawn to, and just kind of a part of who I am. I joke that I do not have an athletic build. I don't have an athletic bone in my body. So computers and video and all that stuff was perfect fit for me. That's what I was designed for.
And you said that you started your own production company. That is very ambitious. Did you go to college before that, or did you just right out of the gate, create your own production company?
Yeah, definitely right out of the gate. I created the production company. I did end up going to film school later on, but by that point I had already been doing work in the field for about 5 years. But I felt like I needed that formal education to really solidify my experience and my understanding of the industry, and make some contacts and grow in that regard. But yeah, so I do have a bachelor's degree in cinematography, although my primary role is generally directing, producing, but I can shoot too. So, but yeah, no, it was a lot of trial and error and just learning from doing, which I am a huge advocate for, especially in film and any kind of media. But I did end up getting my formal education as well.
Brock, I want to ask you the same question. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got into the production world professionally?
Yeah, so for me, I don't have nearly as extensive a background as Orlando. I came into production about 6 years ago. Prior to that, I was a movie fan. I would listen to directors' commentaries, and I was just obsessed with how movies were made without any thought of, hey, I should go and make one myself. That just wasn't on my radar. It was just a passion and a hobby more than anything. And then about 6 years ago, I was approached by a local production company, Tremendum Pictures, and they knew I was a writer, and they asked if I wanted to work with them, and I said yes. And so that first year, I got my feet wet. I went to a couple of meetings on the Warner Brothers lot and saw some movie screenings, and shadowed the guys that were in charge of the company on set, learned about editing and all of these things, kind of in a crash course within a year. At the end of that year is when we made The Shift. So The Shift was my first film. It was my first stab at directing, my first stab at a lot of different things. And yeah, so I studied it like crazy, but I really had no aspirations before that. So I kind of feel like film production found me instead of me finding film production. And once I found it, or rather once I allowed it to find me, I realized that, this is actually kind of my thing. This is what I love, and this is where I feel like I can excel if I just keep going. And so it's been a heck of a journey in a short amount of time.
Wow, that is incredible. And I'm going to go off script here for a second and just ask you guys, your stories are very different, but inspiring nonetheless. And so I wanted to ask you both, what encouragement or what words of wisdom would you give to people who might be in a similar situation to either of you, who want to be in production, or just, are having fun, making videos, or, doing things at home, and are younger? What advice would you give?
So for me, the number one thing is passion. Have a passion for doing it, for telling stories, because if you don't, you're not likely to last for very long. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be very disappointing a lot of times. As much as I'm having this current, swell of whatever's going on with The Shift. It's kind of, I can't even totally define what's happening with The Shift right now. It's incredible and it's amazing. But to get to this point has been a lot of difficulty and a lot of disappointments and a lot of things that haven't worked out. And yet, and I think Orlando has this is where our stories kind of cross over of just trying and trying and trying, and it's seemingly never really breaking through until something really cool happens, But to get to that really cool, you have to have that passion, and it can't be about money, because there's definitely no guarantee of money in this field. People can make a lot of money. People do make a lot of money, but there's far more people who don't at all, and they do it because they love it. And I would say make sure your passion is directed in the right direction. And what I mean by that is there's some people who love to make movies because they love to be able to say they make movies, and they love the way people look at them when they say that. And they love to, to talk about all the things that they do and have people look at them in that way. That is a poor motivation, in my opinion. You need to love it because you love doing it, because you love the creating of it, because you love what happens, and what other people think and how they look at you is totally beside the point. And I would argue you're not going to make really great art if that's your motivation, to be famous or to be known or to be respected. Making art is not about any of those things. And this is an art. This is a heck of an art form, and it needs to be treated with respect. So that's my soapbox. I'll try not to do that again.
No, you're totally fine. This is the space for it. So I appreciate that. I'll pass it over to Orlando.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. Definitely, you have to want it. You have to enjoy it, because the reality is, once you really start getting going, all that fun and that excitement, that can wear off pretty quickly. And so, if you don't actually like what you're doing, you're gonna hate it. And production for me has been very much a love-hate relationship. There's so many things about it that are incredibly frustrating, that are incredibly tedious and taxing, but at the same time, I love going through that process, and I love being able to, at the end of the day, when it's all done, look at something that did not exist before, that is the product of hard work. The creation aspect of it is amazing, and that's what drives me, is going from nothing to something is really inspiring. But I think more than just being able to just be passionate and really like what you're doing and sticking to it, I also would put an equal amount of emphasis on being coachable. You have to be a learner of the craft. You have to constantly be self-examining and understand that if you're not a Hollywood blockbuster producing filmmaker, you've got a lot to learn still. And that's all of us. We're always, and I would argue even those guys are still learning, and they're still taking time to figure out how to improve their craft. And so being able to take criticism and learn how to look for the truth in even bad, negative criticism. Constructive criticism is great, but when people just flat out blast you, like, learn how to see, where is the truth in that you can learn from, and how can you grow? Examine why other people are successful. What are they doing? What do you like about what they're doing? How can you emulate that? It's very much a learner's game, and you have to have equal balance of passion in doing and humbleness to learn. And I think those are the combinations for success.
You've done a lot of different things: editing, directing, producing. Which of those is like your favorite thing to do, the most fun?
Absolutely. So the most fun for me is definitely directing. I love being on set, kind of leading the charge and helping shape the vision and working with the actors and pulling out performance. I love that. Probably equally as much I enjoy producing and being more or less the number two, just kind of helping be in that supportive role, but understanding all the needs that the director has, and being able to be that that backup, that support. All the other things that I've done, from VFX to editing to cinematography and all that stuff, that all came from necessity. It helps you to do what you do like to do even better, because you know what the needs are for every department. You know what everybody's going through because you've been there. And I think it kind of just helps in being a better leader, I think, when you can relate to what your people are going through. But yeah, love directing, love producing. But more than that, I just love being part of the process.
That's incredible. And I definitely loved what you said about, you had to create, your work. And now you know what other people are going through, like what writers are going through and directors and people in every facet of production. And I really love that because that gives you more context and can provide more empathy when you are interacting with those people, because you're going to have long set days. You might be on there for 14 or 16 hours. And, like sometimes that's when people tend to get a little more irritable and just not their best selves. And so you can have a little bit more empathy because you understand, more of what they're going through. So I really appreciate that. And Brock, so besides doing the shift, I just seen that recently you've been working on your comic book series. So I wanted to ask, how has that been going? And just like ask about that, because I don't believe the other interview touched on that. So I just wanted to ask, in addition to the shift, what you've been working on.
Yeah. So you're right. We didn't touch on any of that. And basically, I love working in different mediums. Like I said, I came to film production, relatively recently. And prior to that, I was a writer, and I've written a couple of books, and also, yes, I have a comic called The Super Fogies, which is ridiculous and about old superheroes in a nursing home and supervillains and all of them together. And as ridiculous as that sounds, it's actually much deeper than that. It's anything I do, I try to invest with my values and try to invest with some pretty solid storytelling. So we take what's a ridiculous concept and then we make it something else, because it's all about execution. But I've been working on Super Fogies for about 13 years now, and we just last week the graphic novel came out in stores, Amazon, Target, all those places. But I'm also a novelist and a memoirist. I had a novel come out a couple years ago, YA novel called Paper Bag Mask, which is kind of like a Breakfast Club meets Ocean's 11 type thing. And then I have a memoir coming out in October called The Other Side of Fear, a true story of murder, forgiveness, and faith, and the faith only peace can bring, or the peace only faith can bring, something like that. I can't remember my own subtitle, but that's what happens when you work on too many things at once. That's a true story. A memoir is a true story that's written kind of like in a novel format. And it's all about my dad, and he was the victim of 2 armed robberies in his life. He was shot on 2 different occasions, and in between that, I kind of did all my high school years, and so it's kind of tells that story, and what happened to him, and ultimately his death and things like that. And it sounds horrible and sad, but it's not. It's really not. It's done with a lot of humor, and it's done with quite a bit of hope. And that's really the stories that I love to tell. I love to take the sad and the dark things in life and show how the light is there, how the light peeks through no matter what, and that the light is not that hard to identify if we're only willing to look for it. And I think that's essentially what the shift is, and I think that's what just about anything I work on is all about. Whether it's a book, whether it's comics, whether it's a movie, it's all just storytelling to me. It's all just a new way to tell the story. And I love the challenge of trying to figure out what can one medium do that another medium, what can comics do that movies can't? What can a book do that movies can't? And what can movies do that they can't? That's just a really interesting challenge for me. And it's fun. It's a little bit of a whiplash, a little bit of a brain whiplash sometimes to move from one to another. Especially since right now we're prepping The Other Side of Fear for publication in October, which means I'm working on that at the same time we're doing this massive campaign for the shift. And so my day is in a weird way right now, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I love doing it.
Wow, that is incredible. And yeah, it definitely sounds very busy right now, but thank you for sharing about, all those things and, giving some shameless plugs. You just said something dropped on Amazon, so people can find the graphic novel. So you always got to do your shameless plugs.
That's right. Well, you asked. I wasn't going to bring it up.
Yeah, well, I want our fans to know, there's other great things from Brock. So I wanted to ask, the times that we're living in with COVID-19. Orlando, I wanted to ask you, what has been a challenging part of working in this industry, especially now during COVID?
Yeah, it's definitely become very difficult to get work, at least in the same capacity as before. I mean, we had a number of projects of varying scale, client work that just kind of went on an indefinite hold. it weighs heavy on me when I'm not able to bring in work, because it doesn't just affect me, it affects my crew, it affects my team, and not being able to bring the work that they're also dependent upon to pay their bills. And so I think that's been the hardest thing, is not being able to get back out there, back to creating, keeping people busy, keeping people working. We've seen a shift, no pun intended, to a lot of remote stuff. I've been able to pick up remote work. I'm actually working on a show for Quibi right now, in Entertainment Weekly. But yeah, I mean, we just kind of make do. We do some smaller scale stuff that we can go out with a skeleton crew, a couple of people, and be safe on set, wearing masks, keeping social distancing up, and lots of washing hands and sanitizer and stuff like that. But you can't do the same level of production that we had been before. And so hopefully we get back to that sooner than later, because man, this is rough.
Yeah. And I mean, right now, have you been able to see kind of a light at the end of the tunnel? Some things being able to restart back, even if people are wearing masks and it's a little more restrictive, but have you seen kind of a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I mean, on the Hollywood front, they've kind of gone back to work, and it's very very controlled, very regulated. They're testing every day before people enter the building, getting a COVID check, getting a temperature check. So we are seeing things kind of moving again, but it's not the same pace, it's not the same scale, it's different than before. We're making it work, but really, I mean, just going to keep saying it, just can't wait to get back to normal, because it's not conducive for what we do. I mean, it's a collaborative medium. You're meant to be working with other people in close proximity and in constant communication, and on set, there's a ton of people in confined spaces, and it just we can't do that right now. It's just not safe to do that. So, we make the best we can.
Yeah, I know. Everyone's saying we can't wait to get back to normal, but especially the production world, because like people can work remote if you have a desk job, but it's hard to be acting alongside somebody and have an intimate scene, or a scene where you're talking to each other not 6 feet away. So yeah, I know it has been hard on the production world. But Brock, just diving into the shift's content. So we have a question from our fearless leader, Noah, from Against the Tide Media. And we've primarily been talking about The Chosen with Against the Tide. And now we've moved on to the shift, adding that in, and, possibly some other projects in addition to The Chosen. And The Chosen does a great job of showing the team of love and the good guys. And the shift is doing a great job showing the guy in charge of the opposite team. So Brock, can understanding how evil works actually help people understand God's love better? And how does that look like?
So Noah's getting at a huge theme for me, and a huge theme within the feature film itself, especially because this is really what it's all about for me. We understand things by their opposite. How do I know what sweet is unless I've tasted sour? How do I know what calm is unless I have been angry? And how do I know what love is if I don't, on some level, understand what hate is? And so by showing the opposite, which is, in this case, Satan, we can understand and know the character of God better, is what I believe, and what I think that we see even as we read the Bible. The Bible has many instances of Satan and talking about him, even giving voice to him. And we also see many instances in the Bible of evil, great acts of evil committed against people. This is the Bible. If it were to be made into a movie that showed everything that's talked about in there, it'd probably be an R-rated movie, to be honest with you. But those things are important to understand. Those things are important to see, not in a way that glorifies them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just understanding it and what it is and seeing it. And then by doing that, I believe that God's love is much more evident. If you think about when you're having a trial, when you're having a difficulty in your life, you're experiencing a darkness. You're experiencing something that is against you. And it's in the trials of our life that God is able to come in a way that is powerful and that is much easier for us to see. When I think back on the times of my life when God was a part of things, when he made himself known to me, when I felt closest to him, those are usually the moments when I was experiencing the most difficulty. And I think that by showing that, by showing difficulty, by showing, in the case of the shift, having a man who's actually face to face with Satan and being tempted and being tried by him and going through, especially all the things he's going to go through in the feature film, we have a way to show the love of God that is so powerful and that is so relevant to our lives. And I think that will feel so familiar to people, especially people who have had real difficulty in their life. And to be honest with you, I think that's everybody. I don't know anybody who hasn't passed through some difficulty. And that is when God shows up. When the darkness comes, that's the quickest way to God's love. I really believe that.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody who's never had, a bad time in their life, walking through trials. And, even, that just reminds me of Isaiah 43 verses 2 and 3, where, he says that, in the waters, I will be with you, and through the fire, I will be with you. And, what God's saying there isn't, oh, you're going to avoid the fire. Right. You're going to avoid the water. It's like, no, you're going to go through raging waters and roaring fires, but I will be with you. And so I really appreciate you kind of fleshing that out. And maybe people didn't think about it right at first of, showing the opposite does show even further, God's love in this instance. So I really love how you phrased that. And, I can't wait for the feature length film because, just that bite size, that 20 minutes of showing what he was going through and thinking of what else he's going to go through. I remember you mentioning in the last interview that it's kind of like a contemporary version of Job, and Job didn't go through one thing. Right. He went through so many things, absolutely broke him. And so that's what you're getting at with the movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to show, because the thing that's interesting to me about Job, and I've talked about this before, but I think it's a really key point, which is that Job is not a man who comes to faith. That's not his story. His story is not somebody who is like, I was going along one day and then God woke me up and everything's great. Job starts the story as a man who already has a firm, entrenched faith. It's such a firm faith that God can confidently say to Satan, hey, do whatever the crud you want to this guy, because there is no way he's gonna backpedal on his faith. Like, his faith is gonna remain. That's where Job starts. And I think that is such an important story, because for us that are believers, us who have already achieved a measure of faith, also have already committed ourselves to Christ, to our Savior, we are Job. We have already reached that point, and now we're passing through the fire of this life. And we all, now nobody, to my knowledge, outside of the Savior himself, passes through anything like what Job passed through. But within his story, we see a type of what we experience. And that's what I want to show in the film, is I want to show, we've all seen the short film, and the short film is basically the second half of the first act of the feature film. And so we'll see a version of that in the feature film itself. But the real story takes place after the first act, as it does in most stories, in which Kevin is going to have to deal with the fact that, okay, I've had this moment where God's love and his existence has been made very, very clear to me. And now things are getting worse. So what the crud is that all about? Is God gone? Was he never maybe there in the first place? These are the kinds of questions that he's going to have to deal with. And I think it's the kinds of questions that we as believers deal with throughout our lives. Even the person with the strongest of faith is going to have a moment of wondering, what is going on? Why are things bad right now? I'm doing everything that I feel like I know to do. I don't feel like I'm a horrible person necessarily, but these bad things are happening. So what am I doing wrong? I mean, how many of us haven't had that conversation with ourselves? And that's what Kevin's going to go through. Orlando says he's never had that conversation with himself. He just raised his hand. That's fine, Orlando. You're holy and saintly. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, that's me.
Well, good. I'm glad we cleared that up. But yeah, so that's the trick is, what is it like? What is it really like for us as believers? And it's not smooth sailing. It's just not. And to pretend otherwise is false.
100%. Yeah, I actually had a very similar conversation with my best friend yesterday. She's going through something right now, and she's asking the question why.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just really reminded me of that. And the shift is very different, in, how it talks about love and evil, and it is a very different sort of project. Mm-hmm. And so for Orlando, we have a fan question from Kara Cotham, and she asks, how did you get involved with the Shift project, and what aspect of it are you most passionate about?
I want to say the Shift is actually probably the first project that I met Brock with. Can you correct me if I'm wrong there, Brock? But
no, that's accurate.
I think it was
that's
Shift,
accurate.
Right?
Yeah. It was on the Shift because I needed insurance, and you had a company.
Insurance. That's right.
And somebody said, call this guy. And I was like, okay, hey guy, I don't know. I need your insurance. And you were cool with it. So here we are.
That's right. No, I remember now because I was in Shaver. I was on vacation. And I had to figure out how in the world I was going to get insurance covered for anyways, that's what happened. We made it work and we got it because you needed it for the diner scene.
Uh-huh.
We had to insure the diner. Yeah, so that's how I got connected, and I know, so the Fresno film community, especially at this level, is very, very small, and so everybody he worked with, I already know and I've worked with before, and I enjoy. It doesn't have to be my project for me to be involved in. Like I love being a part of other things and helping other people make their stuff, and so that was the hook in, and then I think. After that, I came out to day 2 of filming. That was all the city streets scenes. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give too much away just because I don't know if anybody's watching this without having seen it.
Spoil it.
Spoiler. So we're there for the car crash scene. In fact, I was the one driving the car that hits Kevin.
Oh, that's right.
The truck.
I forgot that.
That was me. Yeah,
that's right.
The coolest car in the film. That's so crazy. You used your race car driving experience.
That's right. That's right. But it was automatic, so it was even better. I didn't have to worry about stalling it or anything. And so we connected and I just kind of kept helping out with that, and he had a follow-up short film shortly thereafter that, and I kind of helped invest in a very small portion in that, and helped in the producing capacity there as well. And I think the relationship just kind of kept developing from there, and I saw a lot of the same philosophy of not just life but film, and how he approaches things as we were very similar, and so it wasn't too long after that I invited him to be a part of the company, be a part of the stellar team, and he made us a whole lot better by joining. So that's what we've been doing ever since.
Wow, that is incredible. I still cannot get over that car crash scene. That is so cool. Like, man, I feel like that'd be the funnest job ever.
Some movie magic there. It's actually shot in reverse. So I'm not driving full speed at the car. I'm actually driving as fast as I can away from the car backwards. Yep. And you flip it, composite it in, and the little green screen work. And that's how you get a car crash.
Yep. That was our bargain basement car crash technique.
It works. And you can't
flip it in reverse and run the film backwards.
Yep.
Wow, that is fantastic. I didn't know that. That is incredible. See, I come from like the theater realm, like live theater, where you can't really do
practical.
That. But you can do more magic tricks, So our fans who've watched The Shift know this, and as you've spoken about it, Brock, it talks about good and evil. And just kind of a personal question for me. So for me personally, my faith tradition growing up, we kind of always stayed away from spiritual things, especially the bad spiritual things. So for me, films like these kind of make me unsettled. And so when I watched The Shift for the first time, I just felt really unsettled. And when I thought about it, I figured out that it's because I don't want to think about being a player in this like cosmic story of good and evil, and thinking that, the devil actually does exist, and like seeing him personified. And so I know I'm not the only one who, might have had that kind of faith tradition background of not, wading into the waters of like spiritual warfare and really knowing about it a lot. And so what would you say to the audience that might be a little bit more hesitant about this material, and how to encourage them to watch it, especially with an open mind?
So that's a really great question. And that's one I haven't gotten before. But let me ask you a question first. And then, because I want to clarify what you're asking so that I can answer this really well. What do you say when you say spiritual things? What do you mean by that? Because you said not good, not bad, but like, what does that mean to you, spiritual things?
Well, so for me, like the one book that I can recall right now, and you've mentioned this before, is I remember one time my youth group went over the Screwtape Letters, like long time ago. And I was so freaked out by that because, just like the thought of like, evil being in this world and like really actually doing things. Like for me growing up, it was kind of like, you would say it, like you would just think of like this like force that's kind of far away. And, you're like, yeah, there's like evil in this world, but it's very distant. It's very far away, and it's not so like visceral and like tangible. And whenever I would have friends from different faith traditions tell me about experiences that they had, like personally, I would always get freaked out because I never had experiences like that. And they would talk about like, like demons and stuff, and I would get freaked out. And so that's kind of my background. Like my church just like never really spoke about like demons and like actually like in the real world. We would read the stories in the Bible, but then we would kind of just leave it there in the past and not talk about like present day, how things are still happening, and that, we're not just in like a reality where we're like, yeah, like Jesus is going to come back and like things are like sin's here, but like, there's not like actual like players, it's not an actual game of chess or anything like that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get that. I actually get that in a way that I think is probably going to surprise Orlando, because I've never actually talked about this before. I once struggled with the idea of the devil existing as well. That used to be something that my policy was to not think about it. My policy was to deny that he even exists. And the thought at the time for me was that was an empowering thing, to think that, I didn't like the idea of him. I didn't like the idea that there's this other being or person that's set in opposition to me and that has any kind of influence over my life. I preferred to think of it as myself that's solely in charge of me. And I need a savior because I'm not, I can't do all this on my own. But the idea that there's somebody else that's actually, working against me, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe if it was a scary thing. I don't think it was a scary thing. It was just wasn't how I like to think about myself. I like to think of myself as I'm the one in charge. I'm probably a bit of a control freak in that way, which is a really poor way to be as a Christian, because that's what we're told not to be. We have to give it to Christ. But I had a very kind spiritual leader who pulled me aside one day, and he said that I just have it all wrong. That there is an opposition. The Bible's and scriptures are very clear about that. And when we don't acknowledge him, it is much easier for him to trick us. It is much easier for him to do what he does. In fact, that's the thing he would like us most of all to believe, which is that he doesn't exist. Because when we believe that, he is able to do what he does much more easily. And so I resisted that idea really strongly at first, but I eventually came around to it. And I realized too that the effect that thinking in that way was having on me, the wrong thoughts that I was having, because I was pinning everything on myself. Back then I would beat myself up so much for the smallest things. I felt like I was this big, because everything that went wrong, I just attributed to myself. Everything that was bad about me, I attributed to myself. And certainly some things are within my control, and some of the things that are not great about me are my responsibility. There's no doubt about that. But by acknowledging that there is somebody else who is in opposition to me, makes it easier for me to see myself as a child of God, to see myself as somebody who God loves and cares about, and is worthy of being cared about, because ultimately I'm trying to do the right thing, even though I fail sometimes. And ultimately, God's mercy is able to come in easier because there's an understanding within me that some of this is not totally my doing. Some of the temptations that I have, for instance, temptations, period, I think, are not necessarily our responsibility at all. We are responsible for how we respond to temptations, but whatever my specific temptations are that I, for one reason or another, I have a hard time with, those aren't my fault. But in my previous way of thinking, they kind of were, it was all me. And so it really, making that leap helped me to understand that, I'm not so bad. And also that there is an enemy, and that the more I deny him, the easier it is for him to trick me. And so it's better to not do that. So this film tries to throw a light on that. Obviously, this film is like a 180 from everything I just said and everything that I previously thought. I'm trying to shine a light on that. I'm trying to shine a light on Satan. Yes, it's not a fun word to say, not a fun person to think about. But again, as we shine a light on him, we see the tricks, we see the deception. And I would argue, and I think anybody who makes it to the end of the shift will agree, I hope they would agree, we see God's love is a very, very bright thing. And you cannot comprehend brightness without having seen the dark.
Whew, I just loved everything that you just said. Oh my gosh. And yeah, that's very similar to how I thought pretty much my whole entire life. I'm a control freak as well, so that's not good. But yeah, and I remember, I think it was in your interview with Darren, you had said that the shift uses lies to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And, it was weird for you to write it, like writing what Satan would say, mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, I know earlier in my life, I was afraid to say his name. I was afraid to say Satan because right. It just, I definitely denied that he existed. And, you're right. That makes me fall into, his tricks easier mm-hmm. Because of that. And one thing that I do love about the shift is it has this sci-fi in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big sci-fi person. Cool. And it reminded me of a lot of superhero TV shows and movies that I've watched that are talking about multi-Earths mm-hmm. and different dimensions. And I feel like this would be really enticing for younger Christians because you have all the young Christians who love superhero movies like Marvel and the Avengers and stuff, and that has that sort of different dimensions and timelines and stuff. And so that's one thing I really appreciate about the shift is it is talking about a subject that needs to be spoken about, but it's also doing it in a way that's different from how other people have done it. And in a way, it's easier for younger audiences and, and older audiences as well. But younger audiences really love sci-fi and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate that about the shift. And swinging it over to Orlando. So thinking about the shift, how can you see films like this one influence the production world?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I want to take a step back and then I'll jump into that. Part of piggybacking off of what Brock was saying, I think part of what makes this so cool and what my draw was to it is it is what he's talking about. It's that creating of contrast, right? You're creating contrast so you can see the line. You can delineate between good and evil better. You can see what the enemy does and how he works and how he tries to manipulate the situation or manipulate us. And by seeing that, you see the brightness, you see God's love, God's light more clearly because you have that contrast. And then that's actually a film thing we work with. We understand on an artistic level the importance of contrast. You make things pop. It's really bright here. That makes my edge more defined. Whatever, you could see that there. And so it's kind of what's happening on an artistic level there. But in a real way as well, right? I kind of liken it to magic, okay, or magic or a magician, okay. It's only captivating and you don't know what's going on until you know the trick. Once you understand how they do with sleight of hand, with mirrors, with whatever it is, all of a sudden you're immune to it. It loses the fancy's gone. Yeah, if someone tries to do that, you're not awe-inspired anymore. You're immediately like, oh, well, I know how you do that. That's no big deal. Similarly, if we understand the way Satan works, the way the enemy works, what his tricks are, once you've seen it and you understand it, you recognize it when it pops up again, and you're no longer caught off guard. You can identify it and you know how to handle it. So I think it's really cool that that's what's going on with the shift. But more than that, the sci-fi element is a great cinema tool for entertainment. And at the end of the day, part of what we're doing, a lot of what we're doing is entertaining. So we're addressing a truth, but we're also trying to create something that's fun, that's engaging, that's captivating. We want to make something that you walk away from thinking about. And it's racking around in your brain. I love Christopher Nolan films because I feel like every single one I walk away from for weeks, it's just rattling around in my brain. I'm trying to understand, what's going on and, what really happened and just these dynamics and realizing, oh man, this was actually referencing that. And you live with that. So we want to be able to create that. And I think the sci-fi element helps, but more than anything else. And this is part of what I was kind of worried about when we were first rolling this out, and I felt it was really important that we get feedback from the church and churchgoers, because I was really concerned about how the church was going to handle this film. I feel the secular world is going to have no problem with it. I mean, except for a handful of people who really, really hate God and want nothing to do with anything remotely close to God, the vast majority of people are going to enjoy it just from a cinematic standpoint. But what I think that the shift does really well, and what I really love, is that injecting a sci-fi element clearly makes this not a theological argument. This is not reality. This is not historical. This is not a literal representation of what's going on. And so what that allows us to do, to pull ourselves away from the nuance of things that tend to divide the church, big C, people of faith, because we all have our, denominations, and we think a little differently here and there. We don't get caught up in that. We don't get caught up in saying this is the biblical interpretation of this thing, and so there's no room for division. We can look at it at a macro level and say, yes, I universally agree. There is an enemy. The enemy is trying to bring me down and trying to get me to falter and trying to pull me away from God. God is a loving God, and he is here for me, and he's going to help me get through this. And that's all we need to focus on, because that's all that matters. We don't need to get caught up in the nuance and the little divisions. And the sci-fi element allows for that. And I think that's what makes it so exciting, and that's why I get fired up about it. But in terms of like how that would affect the film world, I think it opens the box. I mean, let's be honest. Let's look back at the last 10, 20 years of faith-based filmmaking, and it's a formula. It's, good guy, falls onto a hard time, and there's a mean person, and the mean person gets their uppins at the end, and the good guy walks away, vindicated, and everything's great. And there was really no real stakes. It was just kind of like, oh, he's making fun of me, he's persecuting me. It's so unfair. Now, there's value in that, but it's been done so much that it becomes a trope, right? It becomes this thing that it feels flat. And I think what this allows us to do is we can do a lot of the same things, but we do it in a completely different way that's reimaginative, that gets that curiosity going, that gets that excitement going. And it shows that we can start thinking outside the box in the way we write and the way we tell stories. And in doing so, I think we are going to appeal to more people who would otherwise not watch this kinds of content. I don't know that any of my as much as I actually did enjoy to a certain extent God's Not Dead, I don't know any of my secular friends, my atheist friends, agnostic friends, who would ever stand to watch that. They won't, and they won't. They haven't, and they will not. But I feel like something like The Shift, they absolutely will. It connects on a different level, and so I think it helps us it bolsters the church, it bolsters the community, our faith community, but it also allows a pathway in for those who would otherwise never dip a toe in it. And so it actually ends up being an evangelical tool as well.
Wow.
That was a lot. So
what?
I'll get off my soapbox now. Okay, thank you.
No, I liked it.
Yeah, that was really good. Wow, that was incredible. And yeah, I loved how you said about how now you can get creative, because it's not a theological argument, because yes, that's very true. Like the big C church can get kind of divided on little nuances and differences. And yeah, I think that's very true. Like, people are able to take a step back and say, well, they're not saying that this is gospel, like they're not saying that this is absolutely true, literally. Like you said, yeah, it's entertainment. And sometimes that word can sound kind of cheap when it's like important things like this with the sci-fi element and everything. It just brings, it just makes you step back and not be like, oh my gosh, well, they got this one thing wrong, and it's not supposed to be this,
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, we got a comment on Facebook today.
Just gonna mention that, yeah.
Yeah. And the comment was, I'm trying to quote it exactly. It said, where in the Bible does it talk about parallel Earths? And I'm like, okay, there's a couple different ways to handle this comment. Either they're challenging me, or it's like a sincere, like, where is it? I don't see it. And I took it on face value. And so my response to them was really simple. I just said, absolutely nowhere. It's not in there. But this is a work of science fiction, all caps fiction. And we're trying to deal with faith through science fiction in the same way that C.S. Lewis dealt with faith through fantasy in the Narnia series. I mean, that's really it. We've seen that before, and we accept that. And everybody understands that C.S. Lewis did not think that Jesus was literally a talking lion, unless they did, in which case I can't help them. But C.S. Lewis did not believe that, nor did he believe in a snow queen and all these different things. But he was able to talk about faith through this structure. And it's the same thing we're doing. It's just we're not using fantasy, we're using science fiction. Parallel Earths is a scientific principle, dimensions and things like that. You can research it. I did research it. And marrying that to faith, that's an odd pairing. It's not one that we see a whole lot, maybe ever, but I think it's valid. And I think, and the great thing is the response when that person replied to me and said, thanks, that makes more sense. Great. Fire out.
Yeah. And again, that's all part of the cinematic language, right? The language of storytelling, specifically visual storytelling. And you think of something like Narnia. I recently showed it to my girls who are 10 and 8. And they get the underlying message. Like it was easy for them to connect those dots and see that, hey, this kind of correlates to what I learned in church. Like this, I don't have to explain it to them. That comes through in the storytelling, and that is what's happening here. And I think, like what you're saying, is that it's probably for an older audience, more of the teenager, the 20s and 30s or whatever, and above, the people who like the sci-fi stuff, who like the Marvel stuff. You're right. That's effectively the exact same thing that's happening here. You're taking a genre, you're taking a type, and you're creating, I guess, a parallel to the real story and the real information. But it's not meant to be. This is exactly what it is. It's an allegory.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. So, question for the both of you from Kara Cotham. So Brock mentioned in the last interview of scraping to make ends meet when making the short film, and it's in the investment process right now. So could you speak more on the motivation, difficulty, and faith required to step into this from a producing standpoint for Orlando and a creating standpoint for Brock? So we can start with Brock.
So this is a good question, and it's something I haven't had a chance to talk about too much outside of church screenings a little bit. The shift required a ton of faith on my part, and maybe even more faith on the part of my wife, to be honest with you. Just to frame it, I talked about how I joined up with a local production company in the year before I made the shift, and the reason I did that is because I didn't have a job. My wife and I both lost our jobs within 24 hours of each other a few months prior to the production company contacting me. And despite the fact that I had been interviewing and doing everything I could to, scrape a new job together, it was not working out. And I really did not know what to do. And so when they contacted us, they also said, hey, there's no money because it's an independent company, and, but we think you're talented and we'd love to work with you. And so that became a real matter of prayer for my wife and I. And at the same time, she was thinking about going back to school to get a master's degree, which would, of course, make her more marketable and they're able to get jobs. And so we made the decision on the same day. She was going to get her master's degree and I was going to go work for Tremendum Pictures. And neither one of us was going to make any money, and we have 3 daughters. In any normal circumstance, that is a horrible decision that we made. I mean, absolutely irresponsible. But it was a decision that we made after a great deal of prayer. And so, fast forward several months later, 10 months later, and I'm working at a haunted house. This is the production company I worked with decided to put on a haunted house. And I spent 3 months of my life prepping that haunted house, and then a month of my life running the haunted house as the house manager. And the haunted house did very well for haunted houses, which means it broke even, which means I made almost no money at all. So it's at the end of this experience with the haunted house, having broken my back for 3 or 4 months and had a great experience. But here's my wife who, is breaking her back trying to get her master's degree, and I just didn't make any money. And that's when I went to her and said, hey, you know what I want to do now? I want to make a short film. I want to dedicate my life for the next several months, maybe a year, to making this film when we have no money and I won't be able to do a whole lot else for a little while. And to her credit, she said, okay, but it was bad timing. It was really bad timing to do the shift. It was horrible timing, but it was something that all of a sudden, for reasons that I didn't know, I felt like I needed to create it. I needed to do it. Having never directed a film before, having never written a film before, I felt like I need to make this film. What am I going to do with it? I don't know. As far as I knew, I was going to be able to see it, the cast and crew. Maybe we'd have a party at some point and watch it together. But other than that, I had no designs for it, and I didn't think anybody would necessarily ever see it. So here we are, so many years later, we're gearing up this feature film. I'm getting messages every day, all day from people who were, seeing the shift for the first time and who are touched by it. And who are very moved by it and are seeing in it what I felt when I first put pen to paper and when we first started rolling camera and what I felt like it could be. And to have the film not only be what I thought it could be, but to be so much more than that. And to have it be something that is bringing comfort to people, that's touching their lives. It's an amazing thing. I was dead broke and we made that movie anyway. And there was no budget. We spent $500 on it. That's all we spent on it. And to have it be the thing that it is now, and hopefully we'll be able to make an announcement soon that we've got our funding. The investors showed up. They believed in it the way that we believe in it. They know that this is an important message that needs to get out there, that light cuts through the darkness. And it's a message that I think is even more relevant now with the pandemic and everything that's going on. It's more relevant than it's ever been. Hopefully I'm reporting, in a month and a half's time that we've got our funding and we're off to the races to make this feature film. And if all that happens, I mean, boy, that's going to make sense out of my life for the past 6 years, but even if it doesn't, I firmly believe that it will. I really do. But, just the people that have been moved by it so far, that see it as something that speaks to them in a way that a lot of other things maybe haven't, which isn't to say that other things aren't great or even that the shift is the best, because it's not. It's the shift. It's what it is. It's playing a small part, I hope, in the kingdom, and it's playing a small part in forwarding people's faith. That's really all. It's the only ambition I really got for it. But I think that we can do that on such a greater scale if we can make that feature film. And I truly believe that is why 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was that we made it, 5 years ago, that is why I felt so prompted to make it without even knowing why. And so that's when I say for me, the shift is an act of faith. It really was, because I had no idea what I was doing or why I was doing it. but it seems really clear to me now.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brock. And Orlando, from a producing standpoint, can you speak more on like the motivation with you and like the difficulty and faith that's been required stepping into this and continuing forward?
Yeah. So I think for me, from a producing standpoint, the two biggest things that always weigh heavily on me is one is due diligence. We're asking for a good amount of money from a lot of people, and we need to ensure that we are good stewards of those finances. We don't take it lightly. We don't take lightly. And granted, what we're asking for is literally fractions of what it takes to actually do this kind of stuff. We are doing a micro budget film, but it's still a big ask, and we're still asking our community to trust us, to entrust us with their finances to do this. And we do not take that lightly. I personally do not take that lightly. And I know Brock doesn't either. And so I think that's always probably on the forefront in making sure that everything we do with excellence. We do as much as we can to prep and prepare and deliver the best product possible. Sometimes that means making hard decisions. Yes, we want to have fun, and yes, we want to tell a great story, but we're beholden to our community who is putting forth their finances in us, and we need to do right by them. The second thing I think that is always heavy on my heart is timing. How many years has it been, Brock? How far are we into this process now?
So it'll be 5 years since we rolled camera this December.
I think that's where the faith really comes in, because Brock can tell you there was a time last year where this would have been perfect if we were in production funded working last year. There was times before that where the timing would have been perfect for us. But we had this conversation earlier a couple days ago, last week, where it's just like, there's got to be a reason for the delay, the time that it's taken, and at the same time, as we were talking through it, and we talked about, the pandemic and where everybody's at now, and maybe people are more open to something like this because there's more people who are struggling, more people are hurting, more people are going through it and going through it together. And so there's a shared experience there. But more than that, as we were talking about it, I realized that's God though, right? Like, we are constantly wanting things on our time, when we want it, how we want it. And that's 99% of the time, that's not the way God works. And the Bible says his time is perfect. And hopefully we are coming up on his time, because I'm impatient too. I'm a control freak too. I'm part of the same club here. So, it's really, really tough. Like, we're trying to do everything we can and trying to get, this thing moving on. But now we're here, and I have to believe that there is a reason for that. And we may never know. And there's a lot of things about our life and our faith walk that we may not know. There are some things that I can point to in my life and say, that's why God had me go through that thing, or that's why this was delayed, or that's why this timing is perfect. But there are also things that I have no idea. And whether this is one or the other, it doesn't matter. The point is staying with it, staying faithful with our due diligence, and trusting God and his timing, and whatever comes. And all we can do is do our part, and God will do his.
Amen. Thank you for sharing that. I know sometimes I feel like we're just kind of going through life by the seat of our pants, and we're like, how is this going to work? How is this timing going to work? And, that really is what faith is. And, being able to, lay aside the wanting to control and, letting God do his thing. And so thank you for sharing that. All right. So question to Brock. In the film, we have a question from Janice Barfield. So in the film, why was Satan so bold to reveal his true self to Kevin when they first met?
I like that question. Because he's confident. because he's such a confident dude. And the reason he's confident, and I think he alludes to this more than once, he has done this whole process before. He's done these. I mean, essentially, it's a job interview for him. And it's a job interview in which he knows that that Kevin is going to take the job, because Kevin always takes the job. Kevin this is where we get into the multiple realities things, that there's parallel Earths, there's different worlds, there's Kevins on all these worlds, and Satan interviews Kevin, and Kevin always says yes. He always takes the deal. And that's a crazy thing to think about there being these other versions of you out there, so many of them, that are just bad dudes who take bad deals from the devil. It's like, that'd be a hard pill to swallow. And I think that's part of what Kevin is, I know that's part of what he's going to deal with in the feature film is this idea that he's, at his core, is he even a good person at all? I mean, yeah, he didn't take the deal, but every other version of him did. And of course, the question also becomes is why didn't he take the deal? What makes this Kevin different? And I think that there's a pretty solid clue in the short film itself that you can very easily see. There's 2 times in the course of the entire film when we see Satan thrown off his game, where things aren't quite going the way that he thinks they should. And the first time is most obvious, and that's at the end when Kevin is praying. But there's a much earlier time when he's thrown off, and that's when Kevin reveals to Satan that he used to be religious.
You're a fiend, a crook, a liar. Your goal? Misery.
Straight out of Sunday school. You're religious then?
Yeah, sort of. I used to be.
That's different.
And Satan's comment is, that's different. And then he moves on. And that is definitely a signal to the audience that this has happened before. It's happened a lot. And this is different. This time is going to be different. Why are we telling this story? Because it's different. It's different than every other time. And that's important. So other than those 2 moments, Satan's confident that everything's going to go according to plan. And so that's why he's so bold to reveal his true self to Kevin. That's why he's so bold to just lay it out like, dude, my work is murdering and lying and cheating and stealing. That's what I do, because he knows that on some level, some deep level, and a level that's quickly rising to the top, that's attractive to Kevin. The idea of doing those things, being empowered to do those things, and not just suffering consequences, but actually rising, his status rising in life, and in whatever station he's at will actually be awesome. That he'll get everything he's ever wanted by just letting it fly, by just giving in to whatever, bad thoughts he's got or whatever bad deeds he wants to commit. Because look, there's a part of all of us that just wants to do bad stuff. I mean, it wouldn't be a temptation if we didn't want to do it. And for Kevin, he's a bad dude. He's also a good dude. Which one's going to win? And Satan is very confident about which one's going to win. And he tells him that. And of course, Satan is wrong because of that one thing that's different. He used to be religious. Changes everything.
Wow. Yeah, I know. Well, and when I watched it, especially at the beginning, when Kevin kind of doesn't really know who he is and then he kind of doesn't really believe him, Satan is not threatening at all. He's just kind of like, this cool guy, I kind of liked his outfit. I was like, okay, this is a cool outfit. And he was just like, this guy. So, when he was first introduced and you didn't know his name yet, you're like, oh, who is this person? Like, that's, he's helping this guy.
Right.
And, he's not threatening at all. And then when they go into the restaurant, like everyone's scared to death.
Right.
And it really just paints that picture of, for a lot of us, when we think of the devil, we think of, like a red being with horns.
Right.
And like, you think of like, just something different, something more like scary than like what he is. And so it was really cool in the film to, see him. Cause I mean, yeah, like you said, he's confident and he's like, yeah, I've won all the other Kevins. I'm going to win this Kevin too. We're just having a job interview. But at the end of the film, when he prays and Satan goes away, that actually ties into the next fan question from Jane Moeller. She asks, can you explain why Kevin could leave the restaurant but everyone else was in there. Everyone else was scared in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like they were scared, but it also seemed like they couldn't leave. So could you give us some insight on that?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things with a short film, of course, is that you really don't have a lot of room to explain things. There's going to be things that, there's just, it's a very, at 20 minutes, 22 minutes, whatever it is, it's very compact. It very much, there's a lot of information that's thrown at you really fast, and it's dense in that way. And oddly enough, I'm going to sidebar here for a second. I've never had anybody actually complain about that. I've never had anybody actually say, oh gosh, I had a hard time keeping up. There's so much being thrown at me at once. And I've also never had anybody complain about the length. 20 minutes, by the way, in the film world is an extremely long short film. Like, short films, to be successful, especially in the film festival circuit, should be, 8 to 10 minutes, if that. Let me ask you a question. When you were watching the film, how long did it feel to you?
Ooh, when I was watching, well, I was actually concerned at first when it said like 20 minutes. I was like, oh, this is a short film? Okay. But it really did not feel like that at all, especially in the restaurant scene, because like you said, there's so much going on and you're so enveloped in the conversation.
Right.
And you're like, okay, but like, what's going to happen next? And like, when he gets like the waitress and stuff, you're like, wait, what's going to happen next? And so it really didn't feel that long at all.
Good. That's awesome. And that's what we hear a lot, is that a lot of people, when they don't see it online, they don't see that timestamp, and I just show it to them. And then I ask them afterwards, okay, how long do you think that movie was? Every single time the answer is the same. Oh, about 10 minutes. No, it's twice as long as that, but it doesn't feel that way. So I'm glad that was your experience. So, even within that, we don't have a lot of time to explain things. And honestly, good storytelling is not explaining everything. But I will say that in the feature film, this idea of who these people are, why they're in there, why they're scared, why they're not just, getting up and leaving like anybody else would with that kind of fear going on. And all of that's going to be dealt with in the feature film. We really spend a lot of time in that world. And when I say world, I mean that very literally. Kevin has been shifted to a world in which Satan does that. He interviews Kevin at that diner. And as we know from his comment about the daughters of the cafe owners, he's done it many times in that particular diner. But the feature film is going to spend some time on that world and really explore it. And why is it the way that it is? In what world does everybody know who Satan is and they just do what he says? And why would they do what he says? And how did the world get to be that way? Those are all big, big questions, and they're very much a part of the feature. And I feel like you'll be pretty satisfied with those answers. When I was directing the film, and I was directing all of the extras who were sitting there in those seats, one of which is my daughter, by the way. That was an interesting experience for her. She was only like 12, and it was a very long night. Anyway, my direction to them very much included kind of that backstory. Even back then, when I didn't really know what a feature film would be, or I didn't even really imagine that I would do a feature film, I still had this backstory in mind for why these people are there, what they're scared of. And I told all the actors that. I think they looked at me like I was nuts, because it really goes into kind of deep with this parallel universe thing. And I had to kind of explain some of that to them. But they got it. They got the idea that, okay, we're stuck here. We have to be here. We're scared of this guy. Nobody's ever stood up to him. Got it. And they performed it beautifully based on that. But I think it's fair to say, I think there's some things that you can kind of gather from the short. I think there's definitely a compulsion to be there. I think that there is a role that people have to play. I think that when Satan first comes in, you'll notice the first thing we cut to is the diner owner pulling Tina, the waitress, aside and whispering in her ear and then pushing her forward. That's her father pushing her towards Satan. What would make a father do that? And he's suffering for the rest of it. I mean, we don't ever hear him speak, but he's suffering, watching what's happening to his daughter, feeling powerless. Why is he allowing this to happen? Why isn't he fighting back? And we're going to deal with all that. And I think it's fair to say, if you look at Satan's character, I think part of the reason that they're all there is because he's a narcissist. He's a narcissist. He is loving the entire experience. I look at his interviews with Kevin as like his favorite part of the job. He loves doing it. He loves blowing people's minds and having people suffer, and so he loves an audience.
Good, right?
I think it's also fair to say that once he disappears, they're probably free to go. We just don't see that happen. But I'm very, very excited to get to the feature film and to really talk about that world and show that world and why things are the way that they are. There's a lot of story to be told there, and I think people are going to be surprised by some of the answers.
Man, I cannot wait to see the feature length. Just all these answers, just, putting together some of the puzzle pieces has just been so incredible. And so to Orlando, since you've been a part of this for a while, how was the atmosphere of the short version of The Shift different from other projects that you've worked on?
Like being on set? The set life?
Yeah, being on set, and even now with all the things that you're doing now.
Yeah. So set was set was pretty par for the course, especially for a first film. It was there was a lot of good about it, and but there was definitely learning going on.
Yeah, there was.
But yeah, no, I mean, it was so to be perfectly honest, this is not a typical first film. I think that's definitely something that is probably people don't understand or is misunderstood. My first short film was me and two friends in a tiny. I had another friend who was was in real estate, and he had an empty vacant house, a dilapidated house. And so he let us use the house to shoot our short film in, but it was like three of us on a cheap little DSLR and two big, horrible lights. Like that's usually what your first project looks like. Brock went full scale, like legit production on his first film. So it's very unusual in that regard. And I think that speaks a lot to the crew and to the people involved who were willing to put that level of expertise on the table to create something like this. And so it's, it takes a team, and it takes a big team, and it takes talented people to create good stories and good film. So in that regard, that was very different. I was used to being on those sets when there's a lot of money flowing, not when there's no money flowing. I mean, it was that in and of itself is a blessing. And I think that is a big part of the success of the short film, and why we're able to see what it can be as a feature because of that. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it was both obvious that it was a first film with some learning, but at the same time, it was very unusual for a first film because it doesn't usually look like that. That looked like a professional set, and not like somebody who wants to find out if they're actually a director, which we found out he is.
Thank goodness. It was touch and go there for a little while.
And you can pay me my $20 later for saying that.
I will. I've got it for you.
I love that. So thinking of the film as a whole, we've touched on, talking about how the film talks about the contrasts of good and evil, and, you can't really know like how good God is unless you see the opposition. And so another question from a fan, Tammy Hand, she asks, are you worried about the negativity of this film, like in the film, with it focusing on Satan and the evil of this world? I remember you mentioning, Brock, on one of your interviews that, Screw Tape Letters were some inspiration and some other things of that nature. And so what would you say to people who might be worried about like focusing on the negativity?
So there's a big difference between dealing with Satan and being satanic. And I think that when you get mired in the evil of it, when you glory in it, when you want to show it because of the visceral thrill of it, then you're getting satanic. when you're trying to deal with Satan and trying to expose him, when your every interaction with him is designed, and really this is true, the short film will be true, the feature film, every interaction with Satan is designed to either teach about God or to frame our earthly human experience. Satan is entertaining, yes. As a character, he's entertaining, but we are not supposed to admire him. We're not supposed to think that he's great. We are trying to expose him. And that's how you have Satan without being satanic. C.S. Lewis provides a great template for this. The Screwtape Letters is a perfect example of how to do this while still being true to the faith and not being satanic. Satanism is a trick in and of itself. It operates with deception. And as soon as you expose that deception, it's suddenly not satanic anymore, if you think about it. As soon as we start saying it's not devil horns, it's not, red fire and pitchforks, it's not these crazy pentagrams and worships and stuff, and it's not, even describing it, I don't want to get further than that, but all of the things that we think of as being evil and satanic, as soon as you show like behind the curtain on all of that, and you say, oh no, this is what it's really doing. He's trying to capture souls, for example. All of this stuff is just trying to capture souls, just trying to get people to move away from God. As soon as you just identify it as that, all of a sudden you've moved out of the realm of something that may be inappropriate, and you moved into the realm of something that is enlightening. So that's what I would say, to anybody who's worried about, oh, it's evil, oh, it's so negative, it's dark, yes, but how are we doing it? It's really about the how. And I would argue that there is not a minute in the short, and there is not a minute in the upcoming feature. And Orlando's read the script. He can tell you, he can back me up on this or not. That is satanic. And that's very important to me. Very, very important to me, that nobody comes away feeling like, oh, that was iffy. I don't want to make something that's iffy, but I want to be honest.
Yeah, if I can piggyback off of that as well, it's something like Brock mentioned in the last interview with you guys was, we don't ever walk away feeling that way when Satan appears in the Bible, his interactions with Jesus in particular. I mean, we see who he is and the tricks he tries to pull, and we don't walk away being like, oh, I can't read these verses. It has the devil in it. We can't talk about that. We understand why it's there. It's that contrast, and it's exposing the tricks. And that's all that's taking place here. And I think what is important is it's a accurate representation as far as we can tell in terms of how he operates. We're not saying this is literally what he does, but it's the theme of the way he operates. It's giving you the opportunity to give into those darker desires. There's a line that I really like in the diner where Satan tells Kevin, and you can put the video right here and play that clip, where he says, you're a halfway decent guy. It's the other half that I'm particularly interested in.
Potential. You're a halfway decent guy. It's the other half I'm particularly fond of, and it takes over in the end.
We have the ability and the possibility of doing evil. We may be good people, but we have the capacity for evil. And really what Satan does is tries to push you towards your capacity to do evil. But the control and the decision is still yours. He's not going to literally make your hand go and do something. He physically make you do something. He can't physically compel you to do things, but he can push you and encourage you and entice you. And it looks different in different ways. And we'll see this more in the feature, the different tactics. In the beginning, it's very much, in the short, it's very much, I'm your best friend, and I'm going to give you everything you want. I'm going to give you wealth. I'm going to give you fame. I'm going to give you power. I'm going to give you your heart's desire.
You're rewarded for it. You're a captain of industry. You're a leader. You're a Hollywood producer. You're a king. And I can provide all of those things for you, everything you ever wanted.
You can do that?
Just say the word. It would honestly be my pleasure.
But you're the one that made my wife disappear.
You're the one that's been screwing everything up. Don't be unfair, Kevin. You do your part too, and I can keep on doing mine. I can make your life truly, truly miserable, or I can make you deliriously happy. The choice is yours. Let me give you everything you ever wanted. Just say the word.
But the more you resist, his attitude changes, and then it becomes aggressive, and then it becomes a persecution, then it becomes hostile. And there's different levels depending on where you are with things. And I think it's important to illustrate that, to see that and understand that, so we can draw those parallels in our own life. I think of, again, from even just a literary standpoint and a cinematic standpoint, some of the best stories that we connect to are ones that are kind of tragic. The things that we can see, we may not have experienced that thing, but we know what that feels like. And we know what it's like to feel those ways. And I think that's also what happens here with the shift, is it's setting up in a very extreme and surreal way things that we literally feel ourselves at times through different circumstances. Like Brock mentioned earlier, I don't think there's a single person of faith who can say, oh yeah, I gave my life to Jesus and all of a sudden life's been perfect. I've never had a struggle again. Like, it was the magic button. I was like, Jesus, yes, I believe in you, and yes, you're my savior, and it's been smooth sailing. That's not reality. That's not reality at all. And so we are just kind of digging at that and reminding us that that's real, that's reality. We're doing it in a fictitious way, but we can relate to that. I don't think there's a problem with illustrating the negative side of things, the hostility. We definitely don't revel in it. There's no scene that props Satan up as a cool dude that we want to emulate and look how awesome he is. You may get a fleeting moment of that because that's his persona, but it's immediately undercut by his action and by the way he's revealed to be. I've seen movies with really poor portrayals of Satan and evil, and this is not that. It's not that.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, just that reminder of, Satan tempts us and he pushes us towards, our not so good half side. But, that choice is still ours. And, that's just reminds me of, in the Bible where, it says, God will always provide a way of escape. And with Kevin, that was through prayer. And it's something so seemingly easy to do. And yet, if the common Christian were to be put into that situation, how many of us would actually resort to prayer? And how many of us do that in our everyday lives, resort to prayer when we're tempted by things? So Brock, I know you've talked about prayer before in interviews, and the full-length film is going to flesh out his character more, but I wanted to ask you, why could Kevin in that moment pray? I know you said, he said at the beginning that he's a religious man, but he's going through a lot already with his wife and with work, almost about to lose his job. But, for us, everyday Christians, that is so hard to do. And so why could Kevin in that moment pray?
I hope people are praying constantly. I hope it's not a thing that's something that's rare. It's reserved for the bedside or when, a loved one is in the hospital. Prayer, I believe, can and should be a constant part of our lives. I can't tell you how many prayers I've said, in the checkout line at the grocery store, just because I had some time, it was on my mind, and I checked in. Our Father in heaven, he wants to hear from us. I really believe that. So, prayer is important. Prayer is important to me. It's one of the big reasons that the film ends the way that it does, because I have been frustrated by other depictions of the devil and man versus the devil, and it never going the way that I think it would and should go, which is, if it were me, I would pray. That's what I would do. So why can Kevin pray? Because we know that Kevin says that he used to be religious. He admits to a falling away. But the lessons are still there, aren't they? I mean, we never totally forget, even if we have times in our lives when, our faith isn't as important to us. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it does happen now and again to people. But the lessons are still there. And so there's still a knowledge of this recourse that we have. And I think prayer oftentimes does happen in moments of great distress. Even people who don't have faith will sometimes admit to resorting to prayer in a moment when things are really, really down and they don't know what else to do. And I think that's very telling, because I think prayer is an important and a very important thing. Why could Kevin pray? It's such a great question. And I don't know that there's a satisfactory answer to it, because the only answer that I've got is that because he chose to, because he made the choice. You know, it goes back to what Orlando just said about how Satan can tempt us all he wants, but he can't make us do anything. In that moment, Kevin still had the power of choice. Now, the choice that Satan was trying to present to him was, hey, either you go and you follow me, you swear your allegiance to me, or life's going to be cruddy for you. And he's probably telling the truth. But that's a false binary. You know, there's another thing he can do, which is he can call upon God and have him intervene. And that's what he did. Despair is easy. Hope is the hard choice. The easy thing would be to despair and say, well, I don't see God anywhere, and this guy's yelling at me. He made the hard choice to pray. And look, and it's a brave choice to pray too. And this is why it's brave, because we risk looking foolish when we pray. We really do. To say that I get on my knees every night at my bedside and I pray is to create a foolish picture of myself in the minds of others, some maybe who don't share my faith. That is a foolish thing that I do each and every night, but I do it. And to pray in front of all of those people, not knowing what's going to happen, if any help is going to come at all, that's a brave thing to do, because he risks looking very foolish. What if it had gone the other way? What if God didn't show up and he said this prayer, and then what happens? I have no idea, you know, but it would probably be embarrassing at the very least, you know. So prayer is a brave thing to do. It's brave because you're really counting on the fact that you're not talking to yourself. You're really counting on the fact that there's somebody else listening, not only listening, but they're going to respond in some way. So I look at it, why was Kevin able to pray? Because he chose to, because he could, and he did, and he chose to, and it worked out for him. And I see that I see prayer as a brave act.
I love that. I love how you phrased it. Prayer is a brave act, which, you know, I think, you know, for some of us, we do kind of forget, if we are praying constantly or praying daily, that it does look foolish to the world. And if you are going through a hard time, it is harder to do because, you might be actually asking, like, is somebody actually listening and going to respond? And so it is indeed a very brave thing to do. For the closing question, before we do last words, for both of you guys, what is your overall goal for the message of this film? So what do you hope viewers will leave the theater better understanding? And I can go to Brock first for this.
So we have we're putting it out there on Facebook right now. We're putting the shift out there. People can watch it, on their phone, on Facebook right now. And one of the things that we've done as we've put it out there is that we have this quote at the top that we got one of the church screenings that we attended. There was a man who walked up to me. His name was Rick, and he just told me how much the film meant to him. And what he said to us was, this is the quote I'm reading directly. "Today was one of those days. I was in despair, felt the temptation, wanted to throw in the towel. And this film was a confirmation that I wasn't alone and a reminder to go to God. He has answers for me." That, in a nutshell, is what I want this film to be able to do. I want it to be able to say to people that no matter how dark or despairing your circumstances, God is there. Even if you can't see him, even if there's no evidence, he's there. And if you call upon him, he will answer you. Probably not when you want. He certainly has never answered when I've wanted him to, but he does answer, and he really is there. And it doesn't matter how bad things are. It can get better, and it will get better as long as you're relying on the right person. And then the second message I'd like people to take out of watching the feature film when that's eventually made is that Christian movies can be better. That's it. I just want people to know that Christian movies can be better, that they don't have to be, not good. Some aren't good. Some are very, very good. I'm not saying that all are bad, but I want to be part of the conversation of Christian movies that are good and are representative of the quality of entertainment that I believe that we are capable of and that we should be making. That's my ambition for the shift. Can we reach that? I believe we can. I believe we can.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Orlando, I'm going to toss it over to you.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And to a certain extent, I kind of lost my train of thought because you took a lot of my
Sorry.
answers. It really both. It was like, I hope that we can kind of help set a precedent for what can come from faith-based films. And really, to be honest, like I even hate the phrase faith-based film because it immediately triggers something in your brain of what to expect and what you're going to get. I watch a lot of sci-fi, and when there's a movie taking place in outer space, I don't call it an outer space-based film. That's just the theme that it's built around. And so why do we feel the need to inject that here? And I think we can get a lot more clever and a lot more just really well baked into your narrative with the faith elements that it doesn't feel like and that's the thing. I don't want it to feel like we're hammering in sci-fi into a faith story. The faith should be an element of the sci-fi, right? Or of any other genre. I think we want to challenge the other Christian filmmakers out there, because we're not alone. There's a lot of us out there, and there's a lot of people with great talent and great stories to be bold to do that. I'll be perfectly honest. It's something that's been on my heart forever, and I was never bold enough to take this on just because what's the example? We don't have a template to build off of. Brock was bold enough to challenge the status quo, and it emboldened me to be like, heck yeah, I've been waiting for this, so let's do it. So yeah, I think it would go so far with our culture, and I listened to this podcast on apologetics, and one of the things they talk about is learning to speak the language of our culture, and to address things with gentleness, honesty, and respect. And I think speaking the language of our culture is so lacking in within the church, and specifically within the entertainment arena. And I think we can present an opportunity to speak that language and to speak to people where they are and meet them where they are. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of potential there. But in terms of the film in and of itself, it's the same thing. I think the big takeaway is the value of the persistence of faith, because I know even from personal experience, I've seen God's hand move mightily in my life, and things I can clearly point to is not of my own doing. And then years down the road, being in a similar or more rough position than before, and that strain of like, God, I know you can deliver. You've done it before. I've seen it, but I don't know how long I can hold on. And just the value of continuing to hold on, because again, like we've been talking about, God's timing is not our timing. And I think that's a big theme within this film in the feature, as what you've seen in the feature. You gotta hold on. You gotta hold on. You gotta find a way to keep the faith. And I think what you end up finding when you do is just how far you can stretch and just how far you can go. When you feel like you've met the end of the rope and you're at the edge, you realize that you can actually go farther, and your faith is deeper. And when God draws that out and then he finally comes through, it's nothing like that. It's incredibly encouraging, incredibly empowering, and it puts you on a spiritual, I don't want to say high because that feels like the wrong term, but your faith becomes exponentially stronger than it ever was before. And it's not until you hit the lowest of your valleys and you push farther into that valley does your faith actually grow. And so we to a certain extent, we need those moments. And boy, is Kevin going to experience that moment.
No doubt.
Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for just sharing your hearts with us. And before we end the interview, like we do with all of our interviews, I wanted to give you both the chance to share any last words. And so I will let Orlando share your last words first, so Brock doesn't steal any, so you can have your train of thought.
I'm going to steal all his. I'm going to steal all his.
That's fair.
I'm going to steal all of his now.
You probably are. You probably are. I'll just say it again. It'll be twice as emphasized.
Cool. So I'll let you
know. So first and foremost, we thank you very much for taking this time and giving us a platform to share our heart and our desire and our passion, and for helping us to give this film a chance. I think the biggest thing is just for people who are watching this, who've watched the short film, if it's touched you in any way, like share those, like comment those. Like that's, Brock and I are texting about that all the time, just looking at the comments and just seeing that this isn't in vain, and it's not just for the heck of it. Like there's real value, there's real practical light value there, and it's encouraging to know that we're doing something that is actually helping people. I called Brock a couple of weeks ago because I got a call from a client who had, I hadn't heard from in months, and just how a video that we made for her, long story short, they applied for a grant for their nonprofit, and they were getting nowhere, and she felt like she was losing the plot. They weren't interested, and she was like, "Can I send you this video? I think this is going to help, really get the essence of it." And long story short, they were the one of 7 people to get the grant, and they were the only ones to get the full grant amount. And she was like, "Thank you. Like this was because of your work." And I was like, I've never heard that before. No one's ever told me that the things that we make actually have. I mean, I know conceptually it has real world impact, but to get that back and to hear that's incredibly gratifying. And this is on a whole other level, right? Yeah, it got them some $20,000 or $25,000 or whatever. And that's fantastic for them. But this is life changing. This is life motivating, and to be able to be a part of that and to share in that story with them, I think is incredibly valuable. And it's humbling, and it's very encouraging that the work we're doing is it's more than just entertainment. It's more than just having fun and telling a good story. There's real world impact, and we want to share in that. So please keep sharing those stories. Now, Brock, you got nothing to share.
No, you actually didn't steal it from me. I'm glad that you.
Oh no!
I'm glad you said what you did.
There's one more thing I want to say. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna guess.
No, I echo all of that. The other thing I would say is that we have until September 30th. I'm just putting that out there. We have until September 30th to raise the money that we need in order to make this feature film. If your heart has been touched by the short, if you've been touched by anything we've said today, and you feel like this is an important message that other people need to hear, please consider investing and realize that it is not a donation. We're not asking for you to just give us money so we can go do our thing. You're actually going to be partners with us in making this film, and you'll get all the updates and reports and everything, and you're going to be part of the process, and that's kind of an exciting thing. I hope that if people are so moved that they will follow that prompting and help us, because we literally cannot do it without your help. Ultimately, it is in God's hands. If that is not clear to me by now in my life, I don't know. I guess I can't learn anything. No, I know that it's in God's hands, and I know that it's up to Him whether or not it's going to happen. But I want to do my part, and my part is to say everything we've just said, and then to say we do need your help. We do need your help. If you are able, if you're not able, because everybody's in different financial situations. If you're not able, then please don't. Don't risk anything by investing in this film. I'm not asking for that. If you're in that position, then do as Orlando just said, and share and comment and tell your friends and get it in front of people and help us with that effort. But if you are able to, please do invest if you feel prompted to do so. I believe firmly that it can happen. I believe that it will happen. It's up to you, and it's up to God. And I'm very comfortable with that because I know I can't do this by myself and I don't want to. So yeah, that's my final word, my final plea. I think this is a story that feels very much not mine anymore, which is actually a pretty awesome feeling. I mean, yeah, I wrote it and I directed it, but the more it gets out there and the more we get feedback like Rick's quote, I feel like this is so beyond me. And so when I make a plea for what's essentially dollars and cents, I'm not making a plea on my behalf. I'm making a plea on behalf of the film and the message and what it can do. That's the plea I'm making. So that's my thing. That's my final word.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, please, if you have the means, and if you don't, please pray and share, comment, like the pages, tell your friends. If you haven't seen The Shift yet, you need to, because it is just unlike anything else that I've seen, especially with sci-fi, Christianity just merged into one. And I believe that it'll go a long ways. And so I'm praying for you guys, and thank you again so much for being here with us and sharing your stories with us. Thank you again to our fans. We couldn't do this without you. If you like this video and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification symbol to receive notifications for new videos. And I just want to thank the Against the Tide Media team. And lastly, most importantly, I just want to thank you again, Brock and Orlando, for sharing your story with us and pulling back the curtain for us behind the film, The Shift, and diving deeper into the film and for what's next. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jenalynn.
Cool, and we are out.
Hi, my name is Brock Heasley, and I'm the writer and director of The Shift, a short film about the struggle between an ordinary man and the mysterious stranger who offers him untold power and fame, a stranger who turns out to be the devil himself. It's a story of great temptation and quiet faith that deserves a bigger canvas. And now, in partnership with VidAngel Studios, you and I have a chance to expand the story of The Shift by turning it into a feature film. If there's one thing everyone always asks me about The Shift, it's this: what happens next? What happens after Satan is defeated and Kevin walks out the door? The answer is a lot, and my team and I are ready to bring that larger story to life.
My name is Orlando J. Gomez, and I'm a producer on The Shift. The team we've assembled has worked on films for the big studios, including sound designer Brandon Jones, who worked on films like The Gallows, Transformers: The Last Night, Christopher Robin, and A Quiet Place. Now, we're ready to bring our talents to a film that more closely aligns with our faith.
My name is Kyle Jentz, and I'm the director of photography for The Shift. Christian viewers are smart, and we deserve intelligent, beautiful entertainment that speaks to our values and does not condescend. Kevin's dramatic journey of faith is going to look incredible.
We're planning for a theatrical release and national and international streaming distribution. Reaching our budget goal will allow us to pursue top-notch on-screen talent to give The Shift its best chance on the marketplace.
My name is Heasley, and I played the role of Molly in the Shift short film. I can't wait to find out who replaces me. Is it Jennifer Garner? Can it be Jennifer Garner? Jennifer, call me.
I'm so excited to bring you the rest of the story of The Shift. I want to follow Kevin out the door. I want to see what happens to him after he's had this incredible witness of faith and he knows it's not going to get any easier, it's actually going to get harder. Kevin will try to hide, holding on to his faith and fading scraps of hope even as the devil keeps coming after him. This is the chance to tell the story of a modern-day Job, a person who already had faith and was then seemingly abandoned by God and severely tested. Kevin, like Job, will have to make the choice every day to still believe despite all hardship and evidence to the contrary. That's life as a believer. That's who we all are. We believe, and yet it's tough. And there are times when it's way tougher than others. I think about the years of struggle my wife and I had towards understanding our daughter with special needs. I think about the time after we both lost our jobs within 24 hours of each other, and we wondered, what in the world are we going to do? And I think about how many good people I know who struggle with chronic illness and children who go astray and more and worse. And in those long moments, knowing that God is real and knowing He exists, and we wonder when He's going to help, when He's going to show His face again. That's what this feature film will be about. A man who has already seen God's hand in his life, and that's when a true trial of faith begins. I don't know a single believer who doesn't know exactly what that struggle is like. And by telling that story, we have a chance to entertain, encourage, and bring hope to so many. Check out the site for more details on how to invest now at studios.vidangel.com/theshift.
Cool. I am now recording as well.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Any
Awesome.
last questions or anything before we get started?
No, I would say just, for me personally, I love follow-up questions. Feel free to, dive into whatever you want to dive into. I've taken the time to go through all of these questions and wrote down some notes and stuff. So if you see my eyes dart to the side of it, that's what's going on there. But I thought they were great questions, and I'm excited to talk about this stuff. And I think we can make something. I think this is going to be really different from the first interview I did. I don't know if you saw that.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you know my deal a little bit, but yeah, my goal is to hit you with new things as much as we can.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And just
Orlando, did you have anything else?
I was just say it's a bit of a warning. It's like a little gnat flying around my face periodically.
Still?
So if you see me like doing some kung fu over here, that's what it is. I'll try to play it cool. But
we were in a meeting 2 hours ago and he's complaining about this gnat. Dude, you're like Pigpen. You got to take a bath because that sucker's not going away.
I can't figure out. And I actually took a shower right before we got on the last call, so it's not me.
You know the actor in Peanuts I'm talking about, though?
I do, yeah.
All the lines swirling around him all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah. Every once in a while it lands on my face and like...
Oh my gosh. I mean, one thing that's really helped me, we just moved here about a month ago, and when we moved all our furniture in, there were all these flies that came in the house because we had all the doors open, and Windex is a really good insect killer, I have found.
Really?
So yeah,
wow.
I was like spraying around my bathroom mirror, cleaning everything, and like this fly just landed on it, and I sprayed it, and it was like dead. So
it's gone.
So you can use Windex.
There you go.
Cheap alternative. I like it.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, let me get my notes and just get it all figured out. And all right. So with that, I will start the countdown, and I'll go into speaker view and then gallery view to introduce you guys, and we'll go on from there. All right.
Cool.
So in 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Are you both in Fresno?
Yeah. Both living in Fresno, and this is the hottest part of the year for us. It hasn't been too bad up until this week. This week is killer.
Oh. Yeah, well, it is definitely the dog days of summer. So, but hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and fall will be steadily approaching.
Let's hope.
All right.
The better.
You can go race the track now. So
wow, that is fantastic. I was gonna ask, like, did you like grind the gears? Like, oh gosh. Wow, how fast were you going?
It wasn't like straightaways. So on the straightaways, you're probably getting upwards of, I don't know, 90, 100 miles an hour. But, most of the time you're going through turns at like 60. So but it's still pretty quick for going.
Wow. So like you went that fast. You went like 90.
Oh, yeah.
In?
Oh, no. We're booking it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fun.
Fine. Like I've gotten pretty fast on like a motorcycle, and I was just like, I felt like I was like, I mean, I'm going to die if I fall off, Wow, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. I won't do it again though. No, I don't actually really know this guy. I kind of like just stumbled on set one day, and he was just like, "Hey, you want to make a movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, I like movies." So No. Sorry, my little one was sneaking in, and he was about to jump in, so I had to escort him back out.
You're good.
I got a little bit of that. Can you repeat the question?
No problem. So how can you see films like The Shift influence the production world?
Influence the production world, like just the Hollywood machine in and of itself, or you just mean?
Yeah, so like a film, this is very different. And, like I said, using the sci-fi elements, there have been a lot of films recently, like Marvel movies and stuff that have like sci-fi elements and like multi-earths and stuff. And so how can you see films like this one influence the production world? Here, wait, you're muted.
Okay. There we go. I'm trying to find my notes.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, here we go. Okay, I found it. Okay. I'm sorry. Can you ask me that just one more time? I apologize.
No, you're totally good. Cool, and we are out. Awesome.
Sweet.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This has just been such an uplifting time, and it's been so encouraging, and just to hear your stories and diving deeper into the film. Like I said, with my faith tradition, I'm still very new at learning of a lot of this stuff. So I'm excited.
No, I get it. Believe me. No, I really appreciate the thoughtful questions. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm sorry we were so long-winded.
You're good.
I think we give very detailed answers. So, but there's just it's funny. There's a lot to say. There's a lot to say, and that's actually a good thing.
Yes, so, 100%. And the fans will love it. They will love every minute of it. And trust me, you guys are not. Well, I'll have to see how long this is once I pull the recording. But I know there's been other long ones. So. Really? Yeah, my one with Amber was very long. We were just talking and it ended up being a long time. So you guys don't worry about it. And the fans will absolutely love this. So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's see. So I need to get the file from you. Oh. What you do to get these videos up to people. It takes him 24 hours.
Oh,
24 hours to upload.
Like
the last interview that I did.
We need to do a GoFundMe for his internet.
Well, he's moving to a new place where he's going to have fiber, so that's coming.
Oh, dang! That's awesome.
But yeah, like
blow us all out of the water. Awesome.
Well, I got fiber, so I'm pretty good. But yeah, can you believe that 24 hours he waits for an upload to YouTube? That's
dedication.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, they live in the middle of nowhere, so.
And that's why, And that's why. And I will never live in the middle of nowhere, if only so I can have good internet.
Right? Oh my gosh, I have to have good internet.
Yeah.
Now, working remote, like both me and my two roommates, like we're on Zoom 24/7.
Constantly.
So it's like we have to have good internet.
Yeah. There's no way around it. And I want to stream 4K. Gosh darn it.
Right.
Only 4K? Come on, bro. 6K.
Only 4K. 6K. You know how big a screen you would need for 6K to mean anything to you?
Yeah, exactly.
Like 4K. Most of what you see in the movie theater is 2K.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing people don't know is like, 6K, 8K. You can't even perceive it. You can't even see. Anyways, that's a whole thing. 4K is enough for anyone.
That's right.
You have to have like your whole wall be a screen.
Literally.
Yep.
And you have to be nose to to it to see the difference that 8K or 6K would get you. No other way to do it. Anyway. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jenalynn. We really do appreciate it.
Are you praying?
Last heard from you, but I'm
Really?
Here
This is amazing. Please, I love it.
Please.
Do you really think that God will help you after what you've done? You're tainted goods. You're not even worth his effort anymore. And even if he does help you, do you think I will ever leave you alone? Ever? You can't put me off. I am relentless. I am at your heels. I know you.
And if I am
You
worthy
are
to see
nothing.
me, that I may be
Nothing.
worthy tomorrow.
I am greater than God.
Jesus
I am certainly greater.
Shut up! Shut up already!